Jesse McCrae would later swear he should have kept riding. He would swear that if he hadn't stopped, if he hadn't listened, 3 small lives would not have chained his soul to a town that wanted him hanged. The ice broke under his boots as he tore the first burlap sack open, fingers numb, breath burning. A baby's hand closed around his thumb, too strong, too desperate, and a cracked whisper cut through the storm. "Mama." By sunrise, Silver Creek would call him a kidnapper. By nightfall, a powerful man would use law and paper to take the children back. And within 72 hours, Jesse would be forced to choose between saving 3 babies or losing his freedom, his name, and maybe his life. He didn't know yet that church bells would be rung for judgment, not prayer. Or that a ledger hidden behind a rich man's portrait would decide who owned truth. But even then, as he pulled the other sacks from the creek, something was wrong. One baby's blanket didn't match the others. If you want to see how this ends, subscribe, watch till the last second, and tell me which city you're watching from. Snow swallowed hoofbeats until even the gelding's breathing sounded guilty. Jesse McCrae felt the creek before he saw it, cold rising out of the cut in the land like a warning. Christmas night sat heavy on the world, the kind that made a man think of church doors and whether God still listened. The horse balked and threw its head, steam blasting white into the wind. "Easy," Jesse muttered. Then the sound came again. Not a scream. A thin rasp, almost lost, almost mistaken for wind-scraping ice. Jesse froze in the saddle, listening hard enough it hurt. He should have kept riding. God help me. He swung down. Boots hit frozen gravel. The cold bit through denim. He slid toward the creek bed, one hand out, the other already reaching for the knife on his belt. The creek hadn't fully frozen. A ragged sheet of ice sagged near the far bank where branches had trapped something heavy. 3 somethings. Feed sacks. Wet. Half submerged. Bound tight with rope. One sack jerked faintly. Sweet Lord. Jesse plunged an arm into black water. The cold struck like a hammer. He hooked the first sack and dragged it onto the ice, burlap scraping, water pouring off in sheets. The rope was stiff with frost. The knot sat tight and deliberate. Jesse sawed at it with his hunting knife until fibers snapped. He slit the burlap. A tiny hand shot out and seized his thumb. Blue-lipped fingers clutched with a strength that didn't belong to something freezing to death. A baby's face rose from the sack's darkness. Lashes rhymed with ice. "Mama." The word cracked out of a mouth turning blue. Jesse's chest locked up. That word had no right to live inside him. Not after Winters staring at a small grave and asking heaven questions that never answered back. "Easy now," he rasped. "I've got you." He lifted her free. Maybe 10 months. A thawahon. Girl soaked through. Rope bruises ringed her wrists. A thin red string circled one wrist, like someone had tied hope in a hurry. Another sack twitched. Jesse shoved both hands into the water again and dragged the second sack up. Same rope, same knot. He cut it open. A smaller infant gasped, purple at the edges of the mouth, chest barely rising. A boy, weak, wheezing, making a sound like paper tearing. Jesse pressed his ear near the child's lips, hunting breath. There, a flutter. "Stay with me," Jesse whispered. "Don't you quit." The third sack lay eerily still. His hands hesitated on the rope. The wind rose, slapping grit of snow into his eyes. Far off, a church bell tolled midnight. slow, solemn, meant for peace. Jesse felt none of that peace. He cut the last rope. The burlap peeled back, and a baby stared up at him, wide, dark eyes unblinking. No cry, no tremor, just silence. 3 of them. Dear God. Jesse tore off his coat, wrapped all 3 babies inside it, and pressed the bundle to his chest. Heat. They needed heat, or they'd be gone in minutes. He staggered to the gelding, climbed one-handed, and kicked the horse forward. Go, he growled. The gelding broke into a desperate run toward Silver Creek. Ice cracked beneath hooves. Snow fanned behind them like ash. Jesse kept checking the weakest baby for breath, then felt that faint flutter again. The girl with the red string whimpered, fingers gripping his shirt. The silent baby watched him like she was memorizing a face for later. I know that silence. Town lights appeared through the storm. A porch door cracked. A voice called, "Who's out there?" Jesse didn't answer. Words would cost warmth. The gelding skidded to a halt in front of Dr. Kerr's clinic. Jesse slid down, nearly falling with the bundle. He slammed his shoulder into the door. "Doc!" His voice cracked like a whip. "Doc, now!" A latch scraped. The door flew open, and lamplight spilled out, warm and golden against the snow. Dr. Samuel Kerr stood there in shirt sleeves, spectacles crooked. His eyes dropped to the coat in Jesse's arms, and his face drained of color. Merciful heaven. "No time," Jesse snapped, pushing past him. The clinic smelled of lamp oil and boiled herbs. A stove glowed in the corner. Jesse laid the babies on the examination table and unwrapped the coat with hands that barely worked. 3 tiny bodies, rope burns, blue skin, 1 baby wheezing, 1 baby whimpering, 1 baby silent as snowfall. Kerr moved with the sharp certainty of a man who'd fought death too many winters to fear it. Blankets, hot. Stove, open. Water, warm. Kerr barked. "Lord, don't take 'em tonight." He lifted the weakest first, the boy, and pressed 2 fingers to the tiny sternum, counting the fluttering pulse. Jesse hovered, jaw locked. Kerr rubbed brisk circles to stir heat, then thumped the baby's back with practiced gentleness. For 1 terrible second, there was nothing but the wind clawing the shutters. Then the infant coughed, wet, rattled, and drew a shallow breath. "There," Kerr exhaled. "He's fighting." He shoved the baby into Jesse's arms. "Against your skin, now." Jesse tore open his shirt and pressed the child to his bare chest. The cold cheek stung. The breath fluttered like a moth. Kerr turned to the girl with the red string, checked her wrists again, the rope marks like cuffs. "Somebody tied 'em," he said. "Somebody wanted 'em quiet." Jesse swallowed. "Found 'em in sacks, in the creek." Kerr's eyes flicked up. "Anyone see you ride in?" Outside, the town was waking. Boots on snow, low voices drifting toward the clinic like smoke. A step sounded in the doorway. A woman stood there, coat dusted with snow, breath coming hard as if she'd run. She held a small notebook and a pencil. Her eyes took in the table in one sweep. Rope burns, blue lips, the way Kerr's hands moved, the way Jesse's shirt hung open with a baby pressed to his chest. Kerr stiffened. "Miss Whitmore?" Her voice was steady, educated, and worn raw at the edges. "Doc, I heard shouting." She stepped closer without asking permission. "Those blankets," she said quietly, looking at the silent baby. They don't match. Kerr didn't look up. Not now. Now is exactly when it matters, she answered, pencil already moving. A knuckle rapped once against the clinic door. Curious, testing. Jesse tightened his hold on the infant and stared at the latch like it might betray them. The knock came again, firmer this time. "Doc," a man called through the wood. "We heard crying." Dr. Kerr didn't answer. He slid the iron bolt home with a quiet finality that sounded like a verdict. Then he turned back to the table, sleeves rolled, hands steady. "Blankets," he snapped. "More heat." Grace Whitmore moved without asking. She crossed to the stove, lifted a stack of folded cloths, and shook them once to warm the air inside before laying them over the babies. She did it the way someone used to order, precise, economical, no wasted motion. Jesse stood where Kerr had left him, shirt open, the smallest boy pressed to his bare chest. The baby's breathing scraped in and out, uneven as a bad road. Jesse matched his own breath to it, slow and deep, trapping warmth between skin and skin. "Don't you go yet." Kerr leaned over the girl with the red string. He pressed 2 fingers to her wrist, then to her chest. "Strong heart," he muttered. "Cold, but strong." The silent baby watched him with those wide eyes. Kerr frowned and checked her pupils, her limbs, the faint marks on her wrists where rope had bitten too long. "This one's in shock," he said. "Body's holding tight. Sometimes they don't cry because they've learned it don't bring anyone." Grace's pencil paused. Outside, boots scraped snow, a cough, a low murmur of voices. The town was gathering the way it always did, slow, curious, hungry. Jesse shifted his weight, angling his body so his back blocked the door, without him having to say it out loud. Kerr glanced at him. "You armed?" Jesse shook his head once. "Not in here." "Good," Kerr said. "Guns don't warm babies." Grace stepped closer to the table. She looked at the rope burns, the knots, the fibers clinging to skin. "These weren't tied by someone panicking," she said quietly. "Same knot, same tension. Whoever did this knew rope." Kerr grunted. "A lot of folks know rope." "Not like this," Grace said. "This is practiced." Jesse didn't speak, but his jaw tightened. Kerr turned to the boy on Jesse's chest. He listened again, then nodded. "We've bought him minutes, maybe an hour if God's feeling generous." Grace looked up. "What do you need?" "Milk," Kerr said. "Just drops. And more wood. We don't let this fire die." Grace moved to the cupboard. "The stores are closed." "I know," Kerr said. "That's why I'm asking." Jesse started toward the door. Grace caught his sleeve. Her grip was light but deliberate. "If you step out there right now, you won't make it past the porch without someone deciding what kind of man you are." Jesse looked down at her hand, then back to the door. "They need milk." "They need you not in jail," Grace said. "Or dead." The baby wheezed again. Jesse stopped moving. Kerr didn't look up. "She's right." A third knock hit the door harder. "Doc, open up," woman's voice said. "We ain't gonna hurt nobody." Grace's mouth tightened. "Nobody ever thinks they will." Kerr raised his voice. "I'm working. Come back when the sun's up." Silence stretched, thick and heavy. Then footsteps retreated, slow and disappointed. Grace exhaled through her nose. She crossed to a side table, opened her notebook, and began to write. "What are you doing?" Jesse asked. "Building a spine," she said. "Time found, condition, injuries. Every mark tells a story." Kerr nodded approval. "Paper matters in this town." Grace didn't look up. Paper matters in every town, especially when it's used to bury people. The words landed heavier than she meant them to. For a flicker of a second, something old and sharp crossed her face. "I know what paper can do." Kerr poured warm water into a tin cup and dipped a cloth. He wrung it out and pressed it gently to the boy's chest. The baby coughed again, weaker this time. Jesse's heart kicked hard. He adjusted his hold, shielding the child from the draft, sneaking under the door. "Stay," he murmured. "Just stay." Grace glanced at the girl with the red string. The child lifted both arms weakly, reaching, not toward Jesse, not toward Kerr, but toward Grace. Grace froze. Her hands, steady moments ago, trembled. She hesitated, then took the baby and pressed her against her own shoulder, careful to keep the blanket sealed. The baby settled almost immediately, cheek resting against Grace's collarbone. Kerr noticed. "You've got the touch." Grace swallowed. "I used to." Jesse watched the way Grace held the child. Not desperate, not possessive, just correct. Like someone who remembered how to keep a small body alive. Outside, a lantern flared near the window. A shadow paused too long. Grace didn't look away from the baby. "They're watching." "They always do," Kerr said. "Sooner or later, someone will decide this ain't about medicine anymore." As if summoned, a fist pounded on the door. "Dr. Kerr," a man shouted. "Open up in the name of the law." Kerr's shoulders stiffened. "That'll be Deputy Reddick." Jesse shifted, angling again between the door and the table. Grace spoke first. "Don't open it." "I don't have to," Kerr said. "But if I don't, he'll break it." "Then let him," Jesse said. Kerr shook his head. "Not with these children inside." He crossed to the door and cracked it just enough to speak. Deputy Tom Reddick stood outside, hat pulled low, badge catching the lantern light. His eyes flicked past Kerr's shoulder, sharp and curious. "Doc," Tom said, "folks are talking. Say you've got babies in there." "I do," Kerr said. "They're freezing." Tom's gaze slid to Jesse, then to Grace. "Where'd they come from?" Jesse's hand twitched. Grace stepped forward into the sliver of light. "Found in the creek," she said evenly. "Hypothermic. Rope burns. Moving them kills them." Tom frowned. "That so?" Kerr didn't blink. "That's medicine." Tom hesitated. Snow gathered on his shoulders. "I just need to see him." Grace met his eyes. "Do you have an order?" Tom's jaw tightened. "No." "Then you don't need to see them," she said. For a moment it looked like Tom might push anyway. Then the boy wheezed behind them, a thin, tearing sound that carried through the crack in the door. Tom's face changed. "Jesus," he muttered. Kerr closed the door gently and slid the bolt back home. Silence followed, heavy, uncertain. Grace returned to her notebook. She underlined a line twice. "What's that?" Jesse asked. "Time," she said. "Because someone will try to take it from us." The silent baby shifted at last, fingers curling into the edge of the blanket. Grace noticed something then, A scrap of fabric caught in the fold. Fine stitching. Clean. Not the kind of thing that ended up in a feed sack by accident. Her breath stilled. She eased it free, hid it in her palm, and said nothing. Not yet. Outside, church bells began to ring the first call of Christmas morning. Soft, hopeful, meant to remind people of mercy. Inside the clinic, mercy took work. Kerr stoked the fire. Jesse kept breathing for a child who couldn't. Grace wrote as if words might hold the walls together. And somewhere beyond the door, Silver Creek decided what kind of story it wanted to tell. Whether it would be about babies saved, or babies taken back by paper and force. The night leaned in close, listening. Morning came to Silver Creek without warmth. The sky lightened just enough to show frost crawling across the clinic windows like a living thing. Snow fell thinner now, meaner, less beautiful, more honest. The kind that stayed. Inside, the fire held. Barely. Dr. Kerr fed it split logs with the care of a man tending a heart. Sparks climbed, then settled. The stove breathed again. Jesse didn't move from his chair, shirt still open, the smallest boy pressed to his chest. The baby's breathing rasped, shallow and uneven, but it was there. Every flutter counted. Grace sat at the table with her notebook open, pencil moving in short, efficient strokes. She wrote times, temperatures, the way the rope had bitten, the way the knots matched. She didn't write how the girl with the red string had stopped crying when she was held, or how the silent baby watched everything like she was measuring exits. Facts first, she reminded herself. Feelings get you buried. A kettle hissed softly. Kerr dipped a spoon and let 2 drops of warm milk touch the boy's lips. The child coughed, then swallowed. "That's it," Kerr murmured. "Just like that." The door creaked. Jesse's head came up, muscles tightening without him thinking about it. He shifted his body, blocking the table with his back. It was only the wind. The latch held. Grace didn't look up. "They'll be back," Kerr nodded. "They always are." The girl with the red string stirred and whimpered, a thin sound that pulled at the room like thread. Grace rose and took her, tucking the baby against her shoulder. The child's fingers curled into the wool of Grace's coat with surprising strength. Grace swallowed. Her arms remembered this weight better than her mind wanted to admit. Not again. Lord, not again. The silent baby lay near the stove, eyes open, tracking shadows across the ceiling. She didn't fuss, didn't move, just watched. Kerr checked her pulse again. "This one worries me." "Because she's quiet?" Jesse asked. "Because quiet like that ain't peace," Kerr said. "It's learned." Outside, boots crunched. A wagon rolled past slow. Voices murmured. Someone laughed, short and sharp, the sound of rumor warming itself. Grace closed her notebook. "I'm going out." Jesse turned. "No." She met his eyes. "I'm not bringing trouble back with me. I'm going to see where it's already coming from." Kerr shook his head. "You don't owe these people explanations." Grace pulled on her gloves. "I don't owe them explanations. I owe these children time." Jesse stood. "I'll go." "You won't," Grace said gently. "You walk down that street right now, and they'll decide your whole life before you reach the corner." He knew she was right. He hated that she was right. Grace opened the door and stepped into the cold. The town looked different in daylight. Smaller, closer. People lingered where they didn't need to linger. A woman stopped sweeping and watched Grace pass. A man leaned on a hitching post too long. Grace kept her head down and her pace steady. She smelled it before she saw it. The sharp, dusty tang of grain. Near the stockyard, a trail of spilled feed cut through the snow like breadcrumbs. Grace followed it past a leaning shed, past a wagon with one wheel newer than the others. The trail led to a shack hunched against the wind, smoke leaking from a crooked chimney. She knocked once. No answer. She knocked again. The door creaked open. A man peered out, eyes red, beard untrimmed, hands shaking. The smell of cheap whiskey clung to him like guilt. "Yes?" he said, voice thin. "I'm looking for help," Grace said. "Medicine." The man's eyes flicked to her coat, her gloves. He swallowed. "Ain't got none." "I didn't say for me," she replied. A woman coughed inside the shack, a deep rattling sound that pulled tight at the chest. Grace heard the fever in it. She stepped closer. "Your wife's sick." The man's shoulders slumped. "Been that way 3 days." Grace nodded toward the spilled feed. "You haul grain?" The man hesitated. Just a beat too long. "Name's Eli Sutter," he said finally. "What's it to you?" Grace met his gaze. "Last night, someone paid you to carry something that wasn't grain." Eli's eyes darted past her, down the street. "I don't know what you're talking about." Grace reached into her pocket and set money on the threshold, enough to matter. "This buys medicine, food, a little time." Eli stared at the bills like they might burn him. "I didn't open the sacks." "I know," Grace said. "You didn't need to." Silence stretched. Wind hissed through broken boards. Eli sagged. "They told me not to look. Said it was livestock. Said no one'd miss it." Grace didn't flinch. "Who told you?" He shook his head. "A lawyer. Not from here." Grace felt the shape of the truth settle. What kind of knot did they use? Eli frowned, thinking. "Same one they showed me. Double loop. Pulls tight under weight." Grace nodded once. "I need you to say that again. Slower." She opened her notebook. Eli talked, halting, guilty, honest in the way only scared men could be. Grace wrote every word, every detail, and made him mark the page. When she finished, she tore out the sheet and folded it carefully. "You'll come forward when I ask." Eli swallowed. "They'll kill me." "They already tried to kill 3 babies," Grace said quietly. "You want that on you forever?" Eli's shoulders shook. He nodded. Grace left him the money and turned back toward the clinic. The bell rang once behind her, late morning. She didn't look back. By the time she reached the clinic, the street in front of it was crowded. Deputy Tom Reddick stood near the door, hat off, jaw tight. 2 men flanked him, neither one law, just muscle. Grace pushed through. Inside, the air felt heavier. Jesse sat rigid, the baby still against his chest. Kerr stood with his arms crossed, blocking the table like a fence. The girl with the red string whimpered when Grace entered, then reached for her again. Grace took her automatically. Tom stepped in behind Grace. "Morning," he said, like it was any other day. Kerr didn't return it. You here with paper or curiosity? Tom's mouth tightened. Both. Grace spoke before Jesse could. You don't have an order. Not yet, Tom said. But one's coming. From who? Grace asked. Tom didn't answer. Jesse stood then, slow and deliberate. You take one step closer, deputy, and I won't be polite. Tom looked at the baby on Jesse's chest, the boy's shallow breathing, the way Jesse's hand shielded his back from the draft. Something flickered in Tom's eyes. Christ, he muttered. They're bad off. Kerr nodded. Moving them kills them. Tom rubbed a hand over his face. You're putting me in a corner. Grace met his gaze. No. Someone else did. A man in the crowd outside shouted, Open the door! We know he stole them! The words hit like stones. Jesse's jaw locked. I knew this would come. The silent baby turned her head at the sound, eyes sharp. Grace felt it then, the thin edge of something wrong. She shifted the blanket near the stove and saw it clearly now. The cloth wrapped around the silent baby wasn't like the others. Finer, cleaner, not meant for feed sacks. She didn't say it out loud. Not yet. Kerr stoked the fire again. Deputy, he said, voice hard. You want to help? Keep them outside. Tom hesitated. Then he turned and stepped back onto the porch, raising his voice. Give 'em space. Doctor's orders. The crowd grumbled but eased. Grace let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She looked down at the baby in her arms. Your mama's coming, she whispered, though she didn't yet know if it was true. The baby sighed and settled. The boy against Jesse's chest wheezed, then stilled, just for a second too long. Jesse's heart slammed. He shifted, pressed closer, breathed warmth into the child's hair. There, Kerr said quickly, listening. There it is. The breath returned. Grace closed her eyes for one heartbeat. Outside, the town leaned in, listening to its own hunger. Inside, 3 lives clung to heat and hands. And somewhere behind all of it, behind the knots, the paper, the watching eyes, someone powerful realized the night hadn't finished its work. Neither had they. The paper arrived before the sun reached its highest point. It came folded thick and formal, sealed in red wax, delivered by a boy who wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. He handed it to Deputy Tom Reddick like it might stain his hands, then ran. Tom stood on the porch of the clinic for a long moment, staring at the envelope. Snow creaked under his boots as he shifted his weight. Inside, Jesse felt it before he saw it. The way Tom's shoulders pulled tight. The way trouble always announced itself without saying a word. Tom knocked once. Kerr opened the door just enough to take the paper. He broke the seal with a thumb, unfolded the page, and read. The room seemed to cool around him. Grace watched Kerr's eyes move left to right, then stop. Well? Jesse asked. Kerr handed the paper to Grace. That's the fight, Miss Whitmore. Grace read fast. Her mouth went thin. Lawful retrieval of 3 infants, she read aloud, voice steady. Temporary custody granted to Gideon Ashcroft. Compliance required within 72 hours. 72 hours. The words sat heavy in the room, heavier than the cold. Jesse's hands curled into fists. They're not property. Grace didn't look up. On this paper they are. Kerr rubbed his jaw. It says nothing about their condition. Grace tapped the page. That omission is deliberate. She folded the paper carefully and slid it into her coat. They want to move fast, before witnesses stack up. Outside, a wagon rattled past. Somewhere down the street, someone laughed. The town was already rehearsing the story it would tell itself. Jesse paced once, then stopped. I'll ride out. I'll get them away from here. And where? Grace asked. Anywhere they're not, Jesse said. Grace met his eyes. Running makes you guilty before anyone asks questions. I don't care what they think, he snapped. She held his gaze. You will, when they come with chains instead of paper. Kerr cleared his throat. Children still need heat. That ended the argument for now. Grace crossed to the table and opened her notebook again. She wrote the time the paper arrived. She wrote the seal color. She wrote the name Gideon Ashcroft and underlined it twice. Jesse watched the silent baby near the stove. The child's eyes tracked the movement of Grace's pencil. She don't miss much, he muttered. No, Grace said. She doesn't. A shadow darkened the window. Grace looked up just as Deputy Tom stepped back inside. His hat stayed in his hands. You read it, he said. Yes, Grace replied. Tom exhaled. They're sending a man this afternoon. Lawyer type. He'll want to see the children. Kerr folded his arms. He can want all he likes. Tom hesitated. I don't like this. Grace's eyes softened, just a fraction. Then help us. Tom looked at Jesse, then at the babies. His jaw worked. I can stall, not forever. That's all we're asking, Grace said. Time. Tom nodded once and stepped back outside, pulling the door shut behind him. Silence followed. Jesse broke it. Ashcroft, he said. He owns half the land between here and the river. Grace nodded. And the other half owes him money. The girl with the red string whimpered again, reaching toward Grace. Grace lifted her, tucking the baby close. The child's small body fit too easily against her. Don't get used to this. Kerr moved to the silent baby and adjusted the blanket. As he did, a corner slipped free. Grace saw it clearly now. Fine stitching, neat seams. Not burlap, not feed cloth. She crouched, fingers gentle, and examined it closer. This blanket didn't come from a sack, she said. Jesse looked over. What? Grace held the fabric between her fingers. This is household linen, good quality. Kerr frowned. Meaning? Meaning someone wrapped her separately, Grace said. Or she was somewhere else before she went into the creek. The room shifted, subtly, like ice cracking under weight. Jesse looked down at the baby. The child met his gaze without blinking. Why didn't you cry? Grace stood. We don't say this out loud yet. Kerr nodded. Not until we know more. The clinic door opened again, this time without knocking. A man stepped inside, tall and neat, coat too fine for the weather. His boots were polished. His smile was thin. Good afternoon, he said. Counselor Matthew Hale, representing Mr. Ashcroft. Jesse moved without thinking, placing himself between the man and the table. Hale raised his hands placatingly. I'm not here to cause a scene. Grace stepped forward. Then you won't. Hale glanced at her notebook. Miss Whitmore, isn't it? I've heard of you. She didn't blink, I doubt that. He smiled anyway. Mr. Ashcroft appreciates your concern, but these children belong to him now, on paper. Kerr spoke. On my table, they're patients. Hale's smile tightened. The law allows nothing that kills them, Kerr snapped. Hale adjusted his cuffs. I'm authorized to return this evening with transport. Grace tilted her head. With an order? Hale hesitated. Just enough. Grace smiled faintly. Then you should come back when you have one. Hale's eyes hardened. 72 hours, he said. Ticking. He turned and left. The door closed behind him with a soft, final sound. Jesse exhaled hard. I don't like men who smile when they talk about children. No one should, Grace said. Outside, the bell rang the half hour. Grace sat back down and wrote again. What are you writing now? Jesse asked. Everything, she said. Because when paper comes back, I intend to answer it. The silent baby shifted again, eyes closing for the first time. Not sleep. Something closer to exhaustion. Grace watched her breathe. 72 hours, Jesse said. Grace nodded. We make them count. Kerr added another log to the fire. And we pray. Outside, Silver Creek went about its day, pretending not to see the clinic, pretending not to hear the babies when they cried. Inside, time narrowed to breath, heat, and ink. And somewhere, behind thick walls and heavier money, Gideon Ashcroft waited, confident that paper always won. For now, the house on Ashcroft Hill never looked like a home in daylight. It rose out of the snow like a courthouse pretending to be a manor. Stone heavy, windows narrow, iron gate shut even to the sky. Grace paused at the bottom of the drive, pulling her coat tighter, letting the cold settle her thoughts into straight lines. Paper first. Faces later. She rang the bell once. A servant opened the door, a woman with tired eyes and hands roughened by lie. She looked Grace over quickly, weighing accent, posture, gloves. Yes? I'm here about a letter, Grace said evenly. Dictation, for Miss Violet. The woman's eyes flicked left, then right. Miss Violet isn't receiving visitors. I won't visit, Grace replied. I'll write. The servant hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside, the house swallowed sound. Carpets muted footsteps. Portraits lined the walls. Men in dark coats, stern eyes following every movement. Grace recognized the tactic. Make the living feel small by surrounding them with the dead. The servant led her down a narrow hall and stopped at a door with a lock on the outside. She's in there, the woman said quietly. Don't say I let you. Grace nodded once. The door opened. Violet Ashcroft sat near the window, hands folded in her lap, shoulders too thin for the silk dress she wore. She looked up sharply, hope flaring then dimming when she saw a stranger. I told them I didn't want to write anyone, Violet said. Grace closed the door behind her. I'm not here for your father. Violet's breath caught. Then why are you here? Grace didn't answer right away. She crossed the room slowly, careful not to startle, and set a folded scrap of fabric on the table between them. Fine stitching, clean edges. Violet stared. Her hands flew to her mouth. Oh, God, she whispered. They're alive. Grace nodded. 3 of them. Violet's knees buckled. She slid down into the chair, gripping the table as if it might float away. He said they were stillborn, Violet said, words tumbling now. He said it was merciful. He said... Grace held up a hand. How many did you hold? Violet blinked. 3. For a moment. Before they took them. Grace's voice stayed level. And when they brought papers? Violet's shoulders hunched. I was bleeding. I couldn't read. They said it was only hospital forms. Grace closed her eyes once. Every damn time. You didn't give them away, Grace said. They took them. Violet looked up, eyes wet but burning now. Where are they? In the clinic, Grace said. Alive. Cold, but alive. Violet surged to her feet. Take me to them. Grace shook her head. Not yet. Violet stared at her, betrayal flashing. You said... I said they're alive, Grace said firmly. And they will stay that way if you listen to me. She stepped closer. If you walk out that door right now, your father will put you in a carriage before you reach the gate. The children will vanish. Quietly. Violet's jaw trembled. Then what do I do? Grace leaned in, lowered her voice. You let the town see you, not here, at the one place your father doesn't own outright. The church, Violet whispered. Grace nodded. When the bell rings tonight. Violet swallowed hard. He'll kill me. No, Grace said. He'll try to discredit you. That's worse for him than killing you. Violet looked down at her hands. What if they think I abandoned them? Grace met her eyes. Then you tell the truth, or you show it. How? Grace reached into her pocket and drew out the red string. You tied this. Violet gasped. I didn't want them to forget me. Grace placed it back in Violet's palm. They won't. Outside the room, footsteps approached. Grace straightened. One more thing, she said quickly. Is there a book? Violet frowned. A book? Accounts, payments, names. Violet's face hardened. Yes, in his study, behind the portrait of his father. Grace nodded. Good. The door handle rattled. Grace stepped back, smoothing her coat. I came to write a letter, she said calmly. I'll leave with one. Violet hesitated, then picked up pen and paper. She wrote 2 lines, nothing that mattered, nothing that incriminated. Grace folded it and took it. When the door opened, Gideon Ashcroft stood there, tall, silver-haired, eyes sharp with calculation. He smiled thinly. Finished already? He asked. Grace returned the smile. Your daughter has a lovely hand. Gideon's gaze slid to Violet. Did you behave? Violet said nothing. Grace inclined her head. Good day, sir. Gideon watched her go with the look of a man checking the weight of a threat. Grace didn't look back. By the time she reached the clinic, the sun was already dipping. The cold sharpened again. Inside, Jesse sat with his back to the door, shoulders rigid. The girl with the red string slept on his arm now, breath soft and even. The boy wheezed less. The silent baby lay awake, eyes following shadows. Grace closed the door and leaned against it for one long second. Where were you? Jesse asked quietly. Grace crossed the room. She didn't answer with words. She placed Violet's letter on the table. Then she placed the red string beside it. Jesse's breath hitched. She's alive, Grace said, and she's coming. Kerr nodded once. When? Tonight, Grace said, with the bell. Outside, hooves sounded on snow. A lantern passed the window. Grace opened her notebook and wrote one line. Violet Ashcroft, coerced signature, witnesses pending. She underlined it. The silent baby shifted, fingers tightening on the blanket that didn't belong to her. Grace noticed. She didn't say it yet. The night drew closer, heavy with waiting. And in the house on the hill, Gideon Ashcroft poured himself a drink and stared at his father's portrait, already deciding which laws he would bend before morning. The fire burned low, then caught again. Dr. Kerr fed it carefully, one split log at a time, as if too much hope at once might scare it off. The stove ticked and settled. Outside, dusk pulled its blue coat over Silver Creek, and the cold leaned back in like it had never left. Jesse hadn't moved in hours. He sat with his back against the wall, legs braced, the smallest boy pressed to his bare chest under layers of blanket and coat. The baby's breathing came steadier now, still shallow, but no longer tearing. Each rise of that tiny rib cage felt like a permission granted one breath at a time. The girl with the red string slept curled against Jesse's arm, her fist knotted in the fabric of his shirt, as if she'd decided it belonged to her. Every so often she twitched, then settled again. The silent baby lay closest to the stove. Her eyes were open, always open, watching the room the way some men watched a gunfight before the first shot. Grace sat at the table, notebook open, pencil worn short. She wrote until her fingers cramped, then shook life back into them and kept going. Times, names, movements, every small truth the night tried to swallow. Kerr crossed to her and set a tin cup down gently. Drink. Grace obeyed without looking up. You should rest, Kerr added. I will, she said, when they stop breathing. Kerr didn't argue. Outside, voices drifted past the clinic. Men heading home, women calling children in. The normal sounds of a town pretending nothing extraordinary was happening inside its walls. Christmas lights glowed in a few windows. Someone hummed a hymn, off-key but earnest. Grace paused her writing. You hear that? Jesse asked quietly. She nodded. They're reminding themselves they're good people. Jesse huffed once. Not a laugh. The door creaked, not opening, just shifting with the wind. Jesse's shoulders tightened automatically. His hand slid to the baby's back, shielding him. Grace watched that motion and felt something ache in her chest she refused to name. Careful, she warned herself. This is how you get burned. Kerr checked the silent baby again, fingers light on her wrist. Pulse is steady. She hasn't cried, Jesse said. No, Kerr agreed. Not since she came out of the sack. Grace stood and moved closer. She adjusted the blanket, careful not to startle the child. The fabric was still wrong. Too fine. Too clean. Her fingers traced the stitching again. Do you know, Grace said softly, that some children stop crying because crying stops working? Jesse swallowed. I know. Grace looked at him. Really looked. at the lines carved by cold and loss, at the way he held himself like a man braced against impact that never came soon enough. He's already buried one. The door rattled. 3 sharp knocks. All movement in the room froze. Kerr straightened. That'll be him. Grace closed her notebook. Let me. She crossed the room and opened the door just enough to see Counselor Hale standing on the porch, coat immaculate, breath barely visible. 2 men waited behind him, thick-necked, watchful. Miss Whitmore, Hale said smoothly. I hoped you'd be here. Grace didn't smile. You hoped wrong. Hale's gaze slid past her shoulder, lingering on Jesse's open shirt, the child pressed against him. His lip curled almost imperceptibly. Mr. Ashcroft is concerned, Hale said, about the welfare of his property, Grace finished. Hale's smile thinned. Children. Then he should stop trying to kill them, Grace replied. Hale ignored that. We have transport arriving tonight. Warm, proper. Grace leaned a shoulder against the doorframe. Moving them kills them. That's a medical opinion, Hale said. Not a legal one. Grace's eyes hardened. I'm fluent in both. Hale stepped closer. 72 hours, he reminded her. Ticking. Grace met his gaze. So are heartbeats. She shut the door. Jesse exhaled slowly. He'll come back with more men. Yes, Grace said, and paper. Kerr stoked the fire again. Then we stay. Grace returned to the table and opened her notebook once more. She underlined a sentence twice. Jesse watched her hand move. What happens when the paper wins? Grace didn't look up. Then we make sure it doesn't. The girl with the red string stirred and whimpered. Jesse adjusted his arm, murmuring low. The child's fingers tightened, then relaxed. Grace felt it again. That pull, that dangerous warmth. She turned away before it could settle. The bell rang once in the distance. Evening prayer. Grace checked the time. Soon. Jesse nodded. I'll go. No, Grace said immediately. I know the back alleys, he said. I can watch. Grace hesitated, then nodded once. Don't be seen. Jesse eased the girl with the red string into Kerr's arms and gently set the boy down on the blankets near the stove. He dressed quickly, movements careful, quiet. Before he reached the door, he paused. His gaze lingered on the silent baby. Hey, he murmured, barely sound at all. The baby blinked. Once. Slow. Jesse swallowed and slipped out into the dark. Grace stood alone with the children and the doctor and the fire. Outside, Silver Creek gathered itself, unaware of how close it was to choosing. Minutes passed like hours, then footsteps, light, the sound of a door opening across the street. Grace's breath caught. The clinic door opened again, and Jesse stepped inside, snow dusting his shoulders. She's here, he said. Grace moved to the window. Across the square, a small figure slipped through the church side door, cloak pulled tight, head bowed. Violet Ashcroft. Grace closed her eyes for 1 second. Please don't fail her. The bell rope dropped. The first strike rolled across the town, deep, commanding, impossible to ignore. Heads turned, doors opened, voices stilled. The second bell rang louder. The third rang like judgment. People spilled into the square, drawn by sound older than law. Lanterns flared, faces lifted. Grace wrapped the silent baby in her arms. Kerr took the girl with the red string. Jesse lifted the boy, holding him close, shielding him from the cold. They stepped out together. The crowd shifted, murmurs rising, fingers pointed. Someone whispered, "Kidnapper." Grace didn't slow. At the church steps, Violet stood shaking, hands empty, eyes searching. Grace met her gaze and nodded. Violet stepped forward into the lantern light. "I am their mother," she said, voice thin but unbroken. "And I did not give them away." The words cut through the square. Someone gasped. Someone swore. Jesse felt the boy against his chest breathe in, then out. Grace felt the silent baby's fingers curl into her sleeve. The bell rang again behind them, filling every space left by doubt. And for the first time that night, the cold stepped back. Not far, not for long, but enough to let truth draw breath. The bell did not ask permission. It rang again, full, iron-throated, carrying across rooftops and frozen fields, pulling people out of kitchens and prayers and half-believed excuses. Lanterns lifted. Doors opened wider. Silver Creek gathered the way a body gathers around pain. Jesse stood on the church steps with the boy tight against his chest. The child's breath fogged faintly. Each rise counted without saying the number out loud. Kerr stood to his left with the girl marked by the red string, her cheek pressed into the doctor's coat. Grace held the silent baby, her weight steady, her eyes awake. Violet Ashcroft took one step forward. "I am their mother," she said again, louder this time. Her voice shook, but it did not break. "I did not give them away. I was told they were dead." A ripple passed through the crowd. Faces shifted. A woman covered her mouth. A man shook his head once, hard. From the edge of the square, Counselor Hale stepped forward, coat buttoned high, smile carefully measured. Two men flanked him, their hands loose near their belts. "This is highly irregular," Hale said smoothly. "Miss Ashcroft is unwell. She has been confused." Violet turned to him. "You brought papers to my bed while I was bleeding." Hale's smile held. "Medical necessity." Grace stepped down one stair, placing herself half a pace in front of Violet. She signed nothing knowingly. "I have the dates, the witness gaps. The ink tells a story you don't want read aloud." Hale's eyes flicked to the notebook in Grace's hand. "You again." "Yes," Grace said. "Still here." Deputy Tom Reddick pushed through the crowd, breath fogging, hat in hand. "What's going on?" Grace didn't answer him. She raised her voice instead, clear, firm, cutting through the murmur. 3 infants were found bound in sacks and left in the creek last night. Rope burns, hypothermia. Doctor's records exist. Kerr lifted the girl slightly so the red string showed under the lantern light. The baby whimpered, then quieted when Kerr adjusted his hold. Grace continued. "Anyone here think babies tie themselves?" Silence answered. A man near the front cleared his throat. "Who'd do that?" Grace didn't point. She let the question hang until it found its own target. Hale stepped forward again. "This is slander. The children are under lawful custody." "Show the order," Grace said. Hale hesitated. "Just long enough." Grace nodded. You don't have it. Tom looked from Hale to the babies. His jaw worked. Is that true? Hale's voice cooled. Deputy, I advise you to. I asked, Tom said. Hale exhaled sharply. The order is pending. Grace turned to the crowd. Pending means not here. A murmur swelled, uncertain, then curious. From the far side of the square, a man stepped forward, hat crushed in his hands. Eli Sutter. His eyes darted, then fixed on Grace. She gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Eli swallowed. I carried the sacks. The crowd stilled. I was paid, he said, voice breaking. Told not to look. Told it was livestock. A lawyer paid me. Hale spun. This is absurd. Eli flinched but kept going. Double loop knot. Same on all three. I learned it from the man who hired me. Grace held up the folded page Eli had marked earlier. Affidavit, she said. Signed, dated. Tom reached out and took it without asking. He read fast, then slower. The boy against Jesse's chest wheezed. Jesse adjusted his grip, shielding him from a gust. The motion drew eyes. Some softened, some hardened. Hale took a step back. Deputy, this crowd is not a court. No, Tom said quietly, but it's awake. A lantern flared brighter. Someone whispered, Ashcroft. At the top of the church steps, Violet's knees trembled. She did not fall. I held them, she said, for one breath. Then they took them away. Grace felt the silent baby's fingers tighten into her sleeve. She did not look down. A man's voice cut through from the edge. If she's the mother, why didn't she come sooner? Grace answered before Violet could. Because the door was locked from the outside. The words landed heavy. From the hill, a carriage rolled into view, wheels crunching on frost. Gideon Ashcroft sat inside, face pale and composed, eyes like cold coins. He stepped down slowly, straightening his coat as if entering a meeting he owned. This ends now, Ashcroft said, voice carrying without effort. Deputy, counselor, handle this. The crowd parted, uncertain again. Power did that. It reminded people what it cost to stand wrong. Grace stepped forward until she stood one stair below him. You ordered them thrown into the creek. Ashcroft smiled faintly. Prove it. Grace turned and nodded once. Tom lifted the affidavit. Eli Sutter says he was paid by your lawyer. Ashcroft's gaze slid to Hale. We'll discuss this later. Grace reached into her coat and withdrew her notebook. She opened it to a marked page and read aloud. Time of discovery, rope pattern, medical findings, and... She paused, reached instead into her pocket, drew out a scrap of fabric. The silent baby shifted. Her eyes followed the cloth. Grace held it up. This blanket does not match the others. A murmur rose. Ashcroft's jaw tightened. Just a fraction. Grace continued. Household linen, not feed cloth. One child was wrapped separately. The crowd leaned in. Grace turned slightly, letting the lantern light fall on the silent baby's face. She didn't cry. Ashcroft stepped forward. Enough. Grace met his eyes. Why didn't she cry? For the first time, Ashcroft's composure slipped. Just enough. Tom saw it. Sir, Tom said slowly, I'm going to need you to come with me. Ashcroft laughed once. On what charge? Tom looked at the babies, at Violet, at the affidavit in his hand. Conspiracy, endangerment, and until a judge says otherwise, attempted murder. The word rippled through the square like a stone dropped in water. Hale sputtered. Deputy, you can't. Tom raised a hand. Enough. Ashcroft's eyes went to Jesse then. Cold. Measuring. You, he said. You should have kept riding. Jesse didn't answer. He shifted his stance, keeping the boy warm, keeping himself between Ashcroft and the children. I should have kept riding, he thought, and knew he never would again. Tom stepped closer to Ashcroft. Hands where I can see them. Ashcroft hesitated. Pride fought sense. Then Violet spoke. Father. He looked at her. I'm done being quiet, she said. Ashcroft's shoulders sagged a fraction. Tom took his arm. The crowd did not cheer. They watched. Some prayed. Some counted debts in their heads. Grace felt the silent babies breathing steady against her. She felt the girl with the red string stir in Kerr's arms. She saw the boy's chest rise and fall against Jesse's skin. The bell rang once more, softer now. Not a call, a reminder. Silver Creek would tell this story for years. They would argue the details. They would soften some edges, sharpen others. But tonight, under cold stars and borrowed lantern light, 3 babies lived. And that was enough to start with. The crowd did not stay brave for long. When the bell's echo thinned and the lanterns guttered low, people remembered who owned their debts, their barns, their winters. They drifted away in small knots, voices hushed, eyes sliding back toward the hill, as if the house up there could still hear them think. Deputy Tom Reddick walked Gideon Ashcroft down the steps and toward the office, hand firm on the man's arm. Ashcroft did not resist. He did not need to. His calm was a promise. Paper would come. Grace felt it in her bones. Inside the clinic, the fire welcomed them back with a soft pop. Kerr set the girl with the red string down gently and checked her pulse again. Jesse eased the boy onto fresh blankets near the stove, careful to keep skin contact until the last second. The child's breathing had smoothed into something like a rhythm. Not safe, but holding. The silent baby stayed in Grace's arms. She didn't ask to hand her over. No one asked her to. Outside, a horse galloped past, hard and fast, the sound slicing the night. Grace looked up. That'll be a messenger. Kerr nodded. Or 3. They didn't wait long. The door opened without a knock this time. Counselor Hale stepped inside, breathless, hat gone, hair mussed by haste. 2 deputies followed, neither from Silver Creek. Hale smiled as if he'd rehearsed it. Evening. Tom followed them in, jaw set. I told you. Hale cut him off. I have an order. He held it up. Fresh ink, fresh seal, not local. Grace stepped forward and took it without asking. She read fast, then slower, eyes narrowing. Temporary custodial transfer, she read aloud. Immediate effect. Jesse's muscles went tight. Kerr shook his head. You move them, they die. Hale spread his hands. The law disagrees. Grace looked up. This is signed by a circuit judge 2 towns over. He didn't see the children. He saw the paperwork, Hale replied. Grace folded the order once, then again, careful. You rushed this. Hale's smile sharpened. We're efficient. Outside, Boots gathered again. Quieter this time, more deliberate. Grace felt the silent baby shift. The child's fingers curled into Grace's sleeve, gripping as if she understood the direction of the room. Not yet, Grace thought. Please. Tom cleared his throat. Miss Whitmore. Grace raised a hand. Deputy, give us a moment. Hale scoffed. You've had plenty. Grace met his eyes. 1 minute. Something in her voice made Hale hesitate. Grace turned to Jesse and Kerr. She spoke low. They want them now. Jesse's jaw clenched. Over my dead body. Kerr's eyes flicked to the boy by the stove. That might be exactly what they're counting on. Grace nodded. They'll take you if you fight. I won't let them take the kids, Jesse said. Grace reached into her coat and pulled out the order again. She held it out to him. They'll offer you a choice. Jesse frowned. What choice? Hale stepped closer, hearing just enough. Mr. McCrae, he said smoothly, you're an obstacle. Remove yourself, and this can be painless. Grace closed her eyes for one heartbeat. Hale continued. Sign here, acknowledging transfer. Walk free. No charges. No questions. Jesse stared at the paper. Grace felt something tear inside her chest. Not fear, anger, clean and sharp. Jesse shook his head once. No. Hale's smile faltered. Think carefully. Jesse didn't raise his voice. You move those babies. One of them won't see morning. Hale turned to Grace. Convince him. Grace took the paper back. She looked at the line where a signature would go. Then she tore it in half. The sound was small. Final. Hale stared. You've made this worse. Grace dropped the pieces into the stove. They blackened, curled, vanished. I've made it honest, she said. Hale's face hardened. Deputies. Tom stepped forward. This is a mistake. Hale ignored him. Take McCrae. Jesse didn't resist when they grabbed him. He only leaned down and pressed his forehead briefly to the boy's hair. Breathe, he whispered. I'll be back. Grace caught Jesse's arm as they pulled him away. She didn't beg. She pressed her notebook into Kerr's hands instead. If I don't come back, she said, voice steady, this goes to the judge. Federal. Kerr nodded once. I'll guard it like my own heart. The door slammed behind Jesse. The room felt smaller. Hale turned to Grace. You should have been sensible. Grace met his gaze. I am. He left with a rustle of coats and authority. Silence followed. Heavy. Waiting. The silent baby finally made a sound. A small, startled breath. Grace held her tighter. Outside, a horse snorted. Chains rattled. Kerr moved first. He checked the babies again, methodical, steady. Boys holding, girls warm. Grace didn't move. She stared at the door Jesse had gone through. I won't trade children for men, she told herself. Not again. Minutes passed. Then a tap at the window. Grace turned. A familiar face hovered there. Deputy Tom, hat pulled low. She opened the window just enough. They're taking him to the holding room, Tom whispered. I can stall till morning. Maybe. Grace nodded. That's enough. Tom hesitated. Ashcroft's lawyer will come back with more paper. Then we need better paper, Grace said. Tom swallowed. The book. Grace's eyes sharpened. You know. Tom nodded once. I've always known. Grace closed the window. She turned to Kerr. We're getting it tonight. Kerr's brows knit. The house on the hill? Yes. Kerr glanced at the babies. I can't leave them. You won't, Grace said. You stay. Keep them alive. And Jesse? Grace swallowed. We get the book. Then we get Jesse. The silent baby watched her, eyes bright. Grace looked down at her. You're the key, she whispered. You just don't know it yet. Outside, clouds slid over the moon. The house on the hill went dark one window at a time, confident in its locks. Grace pulled on her coat. She did not look back at the fire. Because if she did, she might stay. And staying would kill them all. The jail smelled of damp wood and old breath. Jesse McCrae sat on the bench with his wrists chained to the wall, coat gone, shirt still open where the deputies hadn't bothered to button it. The cold crept up his spine, patient as a debt collector. Somewhere down the corridor, a man coughed. Somewhere closer, keys whispered. He counted breaths without meaning to. In, out. Stay warm. The boy's breathing echoed in his head, a phantom rhythm he refused to lose. Footsteps stopped outside his cell. Deputy Tom Reddick stood there, hat tucked under his arm, eyes tired in a way sleep wouldn't fix. He didn't speak right away. He studied the chain, the lock, the way Jesse sat like a man who'd already decided what mattered. They'll come at dawn, Tom said finally. Paper says transfer. Judge won't see the babies. He won't have to. Jesse didn't look up. They still breathing? Tom nodded once. Barely. Doc's holding the line. Jesse exhaled through his nose. That's enough. Tom shifted. You could walk out of here tonight. Jesse's head lifted then. At what cost? Tom didn't answer immediately. He reached into his coat and set a folded page on the bench outside the bars. A signature line waited, empty and patient. Sign, Tom said. They take the kids. You go free. Jesse stared at the paper like it might bite him. No, he said. Tom's jaw tightened. Think, Jesse. I am thinking, Jesse said quietly. I'm thinking they die if they move. I'm thinking paper doesn't get to finish what rope started. Tom looked away. For a moment, Jesse thought he'd lost him. Then Tom reached into his pocket and pulled out a small key. He held it between finger and thumb, weighing it like a sin. I can get you 10 minutes, Tom said. No more. Jesse met his eyes. I won't run. Tom swallowed. Didn't say you would. The key turned. The chain fell slack with a soft clink that sounded louder than it was. Tom leaned close. The house on the hill, behind the portrait. You find the book, or none of this matters. Jesse stood. The cold bit his bare chest, but he didn't feel it. Tom, he said. Tom shook his head. Don't. Jesse nodded once and slipped past him into the dark. Grace Whitmore did not take the front path. She moved along the service road with Marta Quinn hunched beside her, both of them wrapped in dull coats meant to disappear. The hill loomed ahead, the house a block of shadow against a bruised sky. No lights showed on the ground floor. The party had ended. Power slept. Marta's breath shook. "If he finds us—" "He won't," Grace said. "He thinks paper has already won." They reached the kitchen door. Marta slid a key in, turned it, then froze. Listened. The house held its breath. Inside, the air smelled of polish and old money. Grace's boots made no sound on the runner. Portraits watched them pass. Men who had never doubted their own rightness. They reached the study. Marta pointed to the wall. There. The portrait of Gideon's father hung heavy, frame thick and carved with leaves that had never known winter. Grace felt along the edge until her fingers found the catch. The painting swung forward. A safe waited behind it, squat and confident. Grace knelt. "Numbers?" Marta whispered them, hands clasped so tight her knuckles shone. Grace dialed slow, listened, felt the lock yield. Inside lay a ledger thick as a Bible. Names marched across the pages. Amounts, dates, notes in a tight hand that assumed no one would ever read them twice. Grace lifted it, weight settling into her arms like truth. Footsteps sounded in the hall. Marta gasped. Grace snapped the ledger closed and tucked it under her coat. "Go." They slipped into the corridor just as voices drifted closer. Men laughing low, already counting victories. Grace turned a corner and collided with Jesse. They froze, both startled into stillness. "Jesus," he breathed. "Quiet," she said. They moved together without speaking, bodies remembering how to make room for each other. Down the back stairs, past the pantry, toward the service door. A shadow lunged. A guard grabbed Jesse's arm. Jesse twisted, slammed his shoulder, drove the man back into a rack of pots that clattered like bells. "Stop them!" Grace ran. The yard exploded with sound. A shot cracked, shattering a window. Jesse grabbed Marta and shoved her ahead. Another shot tore bark from a tree. They burst through the gate into darkness. A horse waited, reins loose. Tom's doing. Grace swung up, hauling the ledger close. Jesse boosted Marta, then leapt behind Grace as hooves thundered. They rode hard, breath tearing, the house shrinking behind them as shouts rose and fell. Back at the clinic, Dr. Kerr counted breaths. The boy's chest rose, fell, rose again. Kerr did not allow himself relief. He did not allow prayer to replace work. He checked the girl with the red string, adjusted her blanket, felt warmth hold. The silent baby watched him. "You stay with me," Kerr murmured. "All of you." A knock sounded, soft, urgent. Kerr opened the door to Deputy Tom, hat gone, eyes wild. "They've gone for the book," Tom said. "If they don't make it." "They will," Kerr said. Tom glanced at the babies. His voice broke. "I don't deserve—" Kerr cut him off. "Then earn it." The horse skidded to a stop behind the clinic. Grace slid down, boots hitting hard. Jesse followed, hands shaking now that the running was done. Marta disappeared into the trees, sobbing relief. Grace shoved the ledger into Kerr's hands. Kerr weighed it, felt its heft. "This'll do." Outside, boots gathered. Voices rose. Authority returned in numbers. Grace opened the ledger on the table, pages whispering. She found what she needed fast. There, she said. Payment to Eli Sutter. Payment for sacks. Payment for silence. Jesse leaned over her shoulder. And this? Grace's finger stopped on a line. Her breath stilled. A notation. A correction. One child listed separately. Different amount. Different initials. Baby C, Jesse said quietly. Grace nodded. She was never meant to be in that creek. The door burst open. Hale stormed in with deputies at his back. Enough! Grace didn't look up. She raised the ledger instead, open to the page that bled truth. Tom stepped in behind Hale, hand on his gun. It's over. Hale laughed, thin and sharp. This is not a court. No, Grace said, but this is evidence. She turned a page. And this is motive. The silent baby stirred, finally making a small sound, not a cry but a breath that asked to be answered. Grace gathered her close. Outside, the bell began to ring again, slow, deliberate, calling not for worship, but for witness. Jesse felt the cold in his bones and the heat in his chest at the same time. Hold on, he thought. Just hold on. The ledger lay open between them. Paper had finally learned how to tell the truth. The bell did not stop. It rolled over Silver Creek in slow, iron waves, reaching doors that had stayed shut for years and hearts that preferred sleep to choice. Lanterns bloomed along the street. Boots gathered. Voices followed. Grace Whitmore stood at the clinic table with the ledger open beneath her hands. The pages lay flat now, obedient in the lamplight. Ink. Numbers. Names. Nothing dramatic at first glance, just enough to ruin a man who believed paper only ever protected him. Dr. Kerr held the weakest boy against his chest, counting breaths under his breath like scripture. The child's ribs fluttered, then steadied. Kerr did not smile. He did not look up. Jesse McCrae stayed by the door. He had wiped blood from his knuckles on the hem of his shirt, but the sting remained, sharp enough to keep him present. Outside, someone shouted his name. Someone else spat it like a curse. Deputy Tom Reddick stepped forward into the room, closing the door behind him with care. His hand hovered near his gun, not drawing it, not trusting it either. They're forming up, he said. Crown's lawyers with them. He's got papers. Grace didn't look up. Of course he does. She turned a page. There it was again. The line that refused to sit right. One child listed separate. A different amount. A margin note in a tighter hand. Jesse leaned in. Say it. Grace swallowed. One of the babies was never meant to disappear. The silent girl stirred in her arms, eyes opening, fixing on Grace with that unsettling calm. No cry, no plea, just watching. Outside, the knock came, harder now, official. Open this door, a voice called, smooth, practiced. In the name of the law. Tom's jaw set. That'll be him. Jesse moved to the latch. Grace touched his sleeve. Wait. She gathered the ledger and walked to the door herself. When she opened it, the cold rushed in, sharp with snow and breath and judgment. The lawyer stood on the step, coat immaculate, hat tipped just enough to suggest respect without offering any. Behind him, men from the town, some curious, some angry, some frightened of being on the wrong side again. "Miss Whitmore," the lawyer said, "you are interfering with a lawful transfer." Grace lifted the ledger. "You paid a man to throw 3 children into a frozen creek." A murmur rippled. The lawyer smiled. "Allegations." Grace turned the book so the lamplight caught the ink. "Receipts." She read a line aloud, then another. Names people recognized. Sums people had borrowed. The lawyer's smile thinned. "This document," he said, "will be challenged." "Good," Grace replied. "Then we'll all get to read it." Deputy Tom stepped beside her. "I'll take custody of the ledger." The lawyer glanced at him, eyes narrowing. "Deputy." Tom didn't move. "Not tonight." A woman in the crowd gasped. A man swore softly. Someone crossed themselves. From the back, a figure pushed. Forward. Violet Ashcroft. She wore no finery now, just a dark shawl pulled tight, hair loose around a face that had learned too much too fast. Her hands shook, but she did not hide them. "They're alive," she said, not loud, not pleading, just a fact that had waited too long. "All 3. The crowd stilled. "My father told me they died," Violet continued. "He told me I signed the papers because I wanted to forget." She held up her hands. "I didn't." The lawyer snapped. "Miss Ashcroft, you are confused." "No," Violet said. "I remember the pain. I remember not being allowed to read." She looked at Grace then. Gratitude, fear, resolve. "I want my children safe," Violet said, "not owned." The bell rang again. Inside the clinic, the weakest boy coughed, a thin sound that cut through the cold like glass. Dr. Kerr adjusted his hold, murmuring, working, refusing panic. Grace turned back to the crowd. "He cannot be moved," she said, "not without killing him." Silence answered. Then a man stepped forward from the edge. Eli Sutter, hat crushed in his hands, eyes red and ruined. "I carried the sacks," he said. His voice shook but held. "I was paid to. I didn't know. God help me, I didn't know." The lawyer spun on him. "You liar." Eli flinched, but didn't retreat. "I signed. I'll sign again. I'll say it to any judge you bring." Something shifted. Not enough for comfort. Enough for danger. The lawyer backed a step, calculating. "We will return with a warrant," he said. Grace nodded. "We'll be here." The crowd broke into uneasy clusters, talk buzzing now that fear had loosened its grip. When the door closed, the room felt smaller. Tom exhaled hard. "You just painted targets on all of us." Grace set the ledger down. They were already there. Jesse watched Violet through the window as she stood alone, breath fogging, hands clenched in her shawl. The red string on the baby's wrist flashed in his mind. He turned away. "Lord, don't make me choose wrong again." Night pressed close. The clinic lamps burned low as Kerr worked through another cycle. Warmth, breath, check, repeat. Grace recorded times, hands steady despite the weight in her chest. Jesse stood watch. He counted footsteps outside, counted lanterns, counted how many men knew how to hurt and how many knew how to help. A shadow paused at the window. Jesse shifted, hand lifting. The shadow moved on. Grace looked up. They won't wait. No, Jesse said. They never do. Tom returned before dawn, snow clinging to his coat. Judge from the circuit's riding in, he said. Crown sent for him. Grace closed her eyes briefly. Then we put the babies where he has to see them. Kerr nodded. I'll write it plain. What movement does. What cold does. Violet knocked, soft this time. Grace let her in. Violet stopped just inside, eyes drawn to the bundles by the stove. She did not rush them. She knelt instead, lowering herself to their level. The girl with the red string turned her head. Mama, she whispered. Violet's breath broke. She did not reach. She let the word land. Grace watched, heart hammering. Jesse looked away, jaw tight. Violet lifted her eyes. May I? Grace nodded once. Violet slid her hands beneath the baby, careful, reverent. The child settled, warmth meeting warmth. No struggle, no fear. The silent baby watched them, eyes bright and assessing. Grace felt the ledger's weight on the table behind her. Ink. Truth. Time. Outside, hooves approached. Not many. Enough. Tom squared his shoulders. Here we go. The door opened to morning light that felt earned and cruel all at once. Men entered with papers and authority, faces stiff with purpose. The judge followed, older, tired, not yet listening. Grace spoke first. Before you read, she said, look. Kerr stepped forward, turning so the judge could see the weakest boy's chest, the way it fought for air. Move him, Kerr said simply, and he dies. The judge hesitated. Grace slid the ledger across the table. Read that, she said, then decide who you work for. The room held its breath. Outside, the bell gave one last toll, low and final. Jesse felt something ease, just a fraction. Stay warm, he thought. Stay alive. Paper rustled. Truth waited. The judge took the ledger with both hands, as if it might burn him. He did not sit. He did not clear his throat. He read standing up. Lamp pulled close. The paper's thin shadow trembling across his cuffs. Outside, Silver Creek gathered itself into a tight, listening knot. Snow fell straight down, quiet as a held breath. Dr. Kerr stayed near the stove, the smallest boy pressed against his chest, fingers counting ribs. The child's breathing rasped, then caught, then steadied. Kerr did not look at the judge. He looked at the boy. He kept looking. Grace Whitmore stood with her back to the table, palms resting on the wood to keep them from shaking. Jesse McCrae remained by the door, shoulder set, eyes moving. Deputy Tom Reddick stood between the judge and the crowd, a line drawn by a man who had decided what kind he would be. The judge turned a page. A name surfaced. Then another. A sum. A correction. A margin note that assumed obedience. Payment to Eli Sutter, the judge read aloud, voice low. For transport. The crowd murmured. Eli bowed his head, then lifted it again and did not flinch. The judge turned another page. His mouth tightened. 3 sacks, he continued. Creek delivery. A woman gasped. Someone whispered a prayer. A man swore. The judge looked up then, eyes finding the room for the first time. Who wrote this? Grace answered without stepping forward. The man who believed paper could drown children. The judge's gaze flicked to Violet Ashcroft. She stood near the wall, hands folded at her waist, shawl drawn close. Her face held grief and something harder beneath it. Miss Ashcroft, the judge said, did you sign any document relinquishing custody? Violet swallowed. I signed something while bleeding. I was told it was a receipt. I was not allowed to read. The judge closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were colder. Deputy, he said. Tom straightened. Sir. Take Mr. Ashcroft into custody. For a moment, no one moved. Then a voice cut the cold. This is an outrage. Gideon Ashcroft stepped forward from the back, coat immaculate, ring flashing in the lamplight. He smiled as if the room were a boardroom, and he had never lost. You will regret this, he said. You own nothing here, the judge said. Not today. Ashcroft laughed once, sharp. Paper protects me. Grace's hand tightened on the table. Paper exposed you. Ashcroft's eyes slid to the babies. Calculation replaced fury. Those children will be better served. Jesse moved. He did not raise his voice. He did not draw his gun. He simply stepped into Ashcroft's path, broad as a door, and did not move again. No, Jesse said. Ashcroft's lip curled. You... Tom's hand closed on Ashcroft's arm. Another deputy stepped in, cuffs flashing. Ashcroft jerked back, disbelief cracking his composure at last. You can't, Ashcroft snapped. The cuffs closed. The sound carried. Outside, the crowd exhaled all at once. Some cheered, some cried. Some only stared at the ground, where a man had fallen without blood. The judge set the ledger down with care. This book, he said, will go with me. Grace nodded. It will. The judge looked at her then. And you will submit your notes. She handed him her notebook. He took it without comment. Dr. Kerr shifted the boy and nodded. He needs another hour. Give him all the hours he needs, the judge said. Ashcroft was led away, his boots scraping, his ring catching once more on the light before disappearing into snow. When the door closed, the clinic felt different, lighter, more dangerous somehow, because hope had entered. Grace exhaled and did not realize she had been holding it. Jesse leaned his forehead briefly against the doorframe. Thank you, he thought, not trusting words. Morning crept in, pale and thin. The lamps burned low. The stove hissed. Dr. Kerr sat at the table with his back curved, eyes on the smallest boy's chest. He counted. He waited. He counted again. The child breathed. Kerr allowed himself a nod. He did not smile. Grace recorded the time. Her handwriting was steady now. Violet sat on the floor near the stove, rocking slowly, not holding, not claiming. The girl with the red string watched her, eyes heavy, then drifted to sleep. The silent baby watched everyone. Jesse brought water. He brought wood. He stood. He waited. Deputy Tom returned after dawn, face pale with the news he carried. Crown's men tried to block the road, he said. They failed. Grace closed her eyes. Good. Tom hesitated. There's something else. Grace looked up. The ledger, Tom began. I know, Grace said. You saw the separate line. Tom nodded. Judge did too. The silent baby stirred, fingers tightening on the edge of her blanket. Grace felt the weight of it then. The misfit detail, the correction, the different amount. She was never meant to vanish, Grace said softly. She was meant to be placed. Violet lifted her head. Placed where? Grace met her gaze. Somewhere that would erase a problem without a grave. Violet's breath hitched. She pressed her palms to the floor until the shaking passed. Jesse listened, jaw tight. Then they'll come again. Yes, Grace said, but not quietly. By noon, the town had found its voice. People came with food, with blankets, with questions. Some came with apologies, some with eyes that still searched for someone to blame. Grace answered what mattered. Dr. Kerr answered nothing that endangered the children. Jesse watched the door. The judge returned briefly, coat dusted with snow. Mr. McCrae, he said, you are free to go. Jesse nodded. I'm not leaving. The judge regarded him for a moment, then nodded back. Good. He turned to Grace. Miss Whitmore, arrangements will be made. Temporary guardianship, shared. Grace exhaled. Thank you. The judge's eyes flicked to the silent baby. And her? Grace did not answer right away. She lifted the child and felt the steady weight of her, the way she did not cry. We will protect her, Grace said, until the truth finishes walking. The judge inclined his head. See that you do. When he left, the room settled into something like peace. Jesse knelt near the stove and touched the red string gently, careful not to wake the girl. Violet watched him and said nothing. After a while, she spoke. You can hold them. Jesse shook his head. They're warm. That's why, Violet said. He hesitated, then reached out. The smallest girl fit against him, light and real. He closed his eyes for a second and felt the bell inside his chest go quiet. Stay, he thought. Please stay. The silent baby watched his face. She did not blink. Grace closed the ledger cover and set it aside. Ink had done its work. Now there was only time. Outside, Silver Creek moved on uncertain feet. Inside, breath rose and fell. Hands steadied. Paper lay quiet at last. Christmas light found the window and rested there. No one spoke. They listened instead, to breathing, to wood settling, to a bell that did not ring anymore. And for the first time since the ice cracked, that was enough. Snow softened the edges of Silver Creek as if the town itself were trying to forget how sharp it had been. Morning spread thin light across the clinic windows. Not warm, just enough to show breath, to prove it was still there. Dr. Kerr did not sleep. He sat with the smallest boy cradled against his chest, the rhythm of the child's breathing written into his bones now. Each rise was a permission. Each fall, a warning. The boy lived. That was the only miracle anyone asked for. Grace Whitmore stood at the table, gathering loose papers into a single stack. She did not rush. The ledger was already gone, sealed, ridden hard toward a judge who could not pretend anymore. What remained were notes, times, signatures, the quiet work after noise, the work that decided futures. Jesse McCrae leaned against the wall near the door, hat in his hands. He had not put it on since the cuffs came off. His hair lay flattened by sweat and cold, his knuckles scabbed, his shirt still open at the throat. He looked like a man who had walked out of a storm and not yet believed it was over. Violet Ashcroft knelt by the stove. She did not touch the children. Not yet. She watched instead, hands folded, learning the shape of them without claiming. The girl with the red string slept curled on her side, breath soft, mouth parted. The silent baby lay awake, eyes tracking movement with unsettling patience. She saw everything. She remembered. Violet swallowed. "May I?" she asked at last. Grace looked at Jesse. He nodded once. Violet slid her arms beneath the girl with the red string and lifted her slowly, as if lifting something that could break the world if mishandled. The child stirred, frowned, then settled, warmth meeting warmth. "Mama," she whispered, half dream. Violet's breath broke. She did not cry out. She bent her head and let the sound stay inside her chest, where it shook her ribs. Jesse turned away. "Lord," he thought, "let this be right." The door opened quietly. Deputy Tom Reddick stepped in, hat held low, snow melting along the brim. He stopped short when he saw Violet holding the child. His mouth worked, then stilled. "It's done," he said. "Ashcroft's on a train. Judge signed the transfer of authority. The house on the hill won't be his anymore." No one answered right away. Tom shifted. "They'll say you turned the town upside down." Grace looked up from her papers. "We set it upright." Tom nodded. He had no answer for that. He lingered a moment longer, then backed out, closing the door with care. Silence returned, heavier now for having been interrupted. Dr. Kerr adjusted his hold as the smallest boy stirred. The child coughed once, thin, frightening, then drew a fuller breath than he had managed all night. Kerr let his shoulders drop a fraction. "He'll make it," he said. Jesse closed his eyes. Violet rose slowly and crossed the room, still holding the girl. She stopped a step away from Jesse, uncertainty flickering. "You saved them," she said. Jesse shook his head. "We didn't lose them." "That's saving," Violet replied. She hesitated, then extended the child toward him. Jesse did not move at first. His hands stayed at his sides, fingers flexing as if remembering ropes, water, ice. Grace watched him. She said nothing. Jesse reached out. The girl fit against him with a weight that felt impossibly light and unbearably heavy all at once. He supported her head, adjusted his arm, found the balance without thinking. She sighed and pressed her face into his chest, small fingers clutching cloth. His breath caught. "Don't fail again," he thought. "Please." The silent baby watched him closely, eyes dark and knowing. Grace finished stacking the papers and tied them with string. She set them aside and crossed to the stove, warming her hands without looking at the flames. Violet lowered herself to sit on the floor, back against the wall, exhaustion finally finding her. "They told me I wasn't fit," she said quietly. "They said grief made me dangerous." Grace nodded. "Grief makes liars uncomfortable." Violet looked at her. Will they take them from me? Grace met her gaze steadily. Not today, and not without a fight they can't win. Violet swallowed. And you? Grace glanced at Jesse, at the children, at the room that smelled of wood smoke and medicine. I'll stay, she said, as long as I'm useful. Jesse shifted the girl slightly and looked at Grace then. You're already that. She held his gaze for a beat, then looked away, returning to the stove. Someone has to write the papers right this time. Outside, hooves sounded, slow, careful. A rider approached the clinic, then stopped. Jesse stiffened. The door opened. A man stood there, hat in hand, coat torn, face gaunt with cold and travel. Snow crusted his beard. His eyes were bloodshot, hollowed by weeks of running. Violet froze. The man's gaze moved past Jesse, past Grace, and found the children. His breath left him in a rush. Ivy, he began, then stopped, shook his head. Violet. Her name fell from his mouth like something rescued. She stood, swaying. Mateo? He nodded, tears carving lines through the grime on his face. They hunted me, he said hoarsely. I thought I'd never make it back. She crossed the room in 3 steps and caught him as his knees gave. He held her like a man afraid the ground would open beneath him. Jesse stepped back, instinctively making space. Pain flickered through him, quick, sharp, then settled into something quieter. He swallowed it. Family grows, Grace had said. Mateo lifted his head and saw Jesse holding the child. He stared, then nodded slowly. You kept them alive, Mateo said. It was not a question. Jesse nodded once. They did most of the work. Mateo managed a breathless laugh. He stepped forward, extended a hand. Jesse shifted the girl to one arm and took it. The grip was firm, grateful. If you protected them, Mateo said, you're kin to me. Jesse felt the words settle, unexpected and solid. The silent baby made a small sound then, not a cry, not a laugh, just breath. She reached out, fingers brushing Jesse's sleeve, then Violet's, then Grace's, as Grace knelt beside them. A choice, small and perfect. Dr. Kerr chuckled softly. She's got sense. Snow drifted past the window, lazy now, no longer sharp. Grace gathered her coat. There's a house at the edge of town, she said. Empty. Warm enough if we keep the fire fed. Violet nodded. We'll go there. Mateo tightened his arm around her. Together. Jesse looked down at the child in his arms. She slept, trusting. He lifted his gaze to Grace. You coming? Grace hesitated only a second. She reached for her satchel, slid her notebook inside and closed it. Yes, she said. They moved carefully, wrapping the children, lifting them one by one. No rush now, no chase, just the work of leaving. As they stepped out into the pale winter light, the town watched from a distance. Quiet, uncertain, changed. The bell did not ring. It did not need to. Jesse felt the cold ease from his chest as the girl stirred and sighed against him. He adjusted his hold and walked on, boots crunching softly, each step away from the creek and toward something that did not yet have a name. But it breathed, and for now, that was enough.